Hey everybody, we're here for the final session of today where we're really pleased to be talking all about CVs. Now, myself and Marika, I don't know how, Marika, have you got a functioning CV at the moment?
Sort of. I will be taking notes as well.
Exactly. I think for me too. So to help us with that, I'm really pleased to welcome Lauren Hill to the call. Welcome, Lauren. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So the students may have been to the previous session looking with the digital garage at like creating CVs and cover letters. Now, obviously, in your role at Google, you're a bit more involved in this. So, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself and your role and the session today?
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you. And I'm so excited to be here with everyone. I can't see anyone, but I hope everybody's having a good time. And I know that you've had a bit of a CV workshop already with the design studio. So this will be a bit of a follow up. And I want to leave plenty of room for questions at the end. So I think that's really where we get a lot of value. But I'm Lauren. It's nice to meet you. I work at Google in our people operations division. So that's human resources at Google. And I specifically am a recruiter. I've been here for about 3 years. Before that, I worked in a bank doing something very similar, recruiting. Before that, I worked at a recruiting agency. And before that, I was in publishing. A bit about me. I'm American. You can probably tell. I grew up in Texas and then moved to the UK when I was 11 and went to school and went to university here. So I have submitted multiple CVs in the UK and I have read through thousands of CVs throughout my career. So it's a subject that I am passionate about.
Perfect. So there we go. They're the credentials for it. What I'll do is I will get your slides up and let you talk through the background. And then, please, teachers, if you're with a class, if you can get some questions in via the comments, we'll put a link up to a form you can submit questions. We would love all and any questions that any of the young people have about CVs. Like, what are they? Do I have to do it as a document? All of these different things. We'd love to hear from them. And also, teachers, if you just want to farm a few questions from the class in front of you, put those in the comments to the right of this side of the stream. Then we'll also pass those on to Lauren as well. And we've also got a couple of CVs to have a look through with Lauren too. So without further ado, I will bring in your slides and pass over to you, Lauren. And obviously give me a nudge when you want to move on to them.
Thank you so much. Let's move to the second slide, please, Ben. Super. So a CV, also known as a resume, is a brief written account of personal, educational, and professional qualifications and experience as that prepared by an applicant for a job. So a CV is your calling card, right? 9 times out of 10, it will be the first thing an employer sees about you when you apply to a job. The other 1 out of 10 times may come from already knowing someone from the company you're applying to. So you've been referred or you've worked there before, but really the CV or resume is that important piece of information that is shared up front, and it's a first impression. And you've probably heard the expression, you can't make a first impression twice, which also applies to your CV. So it's definitely important. Next slide, please. So this is a statistic from a career builder survey that you may or may not have seen, but it says that 40% of human resource managers initially spend less than a minute looking at a resume, and 19 spend less than 30 seconds. So who's looking at your CV? It's either going to be a hiring manager, so that's the person that is hiring for the role, the person in the team that you would report into, or it's going to be the recruiter. And the recruiter is the person that has been assigned to a role to help that hiring manager recruit. And the takeaway here is, your CV is important, so spend some time on it. I do sometimes think that at this stage in lives and careers, people tend to get really stuck into doing and redoing and doing their CV, and delay applying for a job because they don't feel like their CV is ready. And what I would say is, don't stress too much, spend a good amount of time on it and then move on. And it will be something that you continue to tweak and work on as you move forward. Next slide, please. Thank you. So knowing your is there one slide? Have we just skipped one, Ben? Perfect. There. Thank you. Know your audience. So your resume should be constantly evolving, like I said. It should change with every job, almost every job you apply to. It should showcase the impact that you're continuing to have in new roles. It should speak to you and your brand, which may also be evolving, and it should include data. So one of the key messages that we want to share with you is that your CV should constantly change and be tailored to the job that you're applying to. And I know from speaking to the organizers of this event that this group has done so much already. So make sure that you're getting that down onto paper. People often say to me, well, I haven't done anything. There's nothing to share. I just know that that's not true. And we'll speak a bit more about, what you should include and what you shouldn't include in a bit. But as you gain more achievements and more experience and become more clear in your minds as to what you're looking for and what you're good at, you'll make those adjustments. The other thing I would say is know your audience and assume that they don't know you or the companies that you've worked for. So give a lot of detail into what the company does. Don't, even if it's a Google or an Amazon or a Facebook that you work at or that you have worked at, don't assume that somebody knows what that is, and make sure that you are very clearly explaining the company and what your role was and what that role means and what you did. And then where you can use data. And companies want to know about your interests and your brand from the organizations that you've been involved in. I can tell as the recruiter, I can tell what you care about because of your hobbies or because of small things that you've done, from the positions that you've taken on, from promotions that you've had. We can tell how you work in groups and how you communicate and where your passions lies and what you'll ultimately bring to my organization or whatever organization it is you're applying to. And I think people these days at companies are looking for what we call at Google a culture ad as opposed to a culture fit. And those are individuals who bring something new. We are hiring because we need to fill a gap or a space. And we need someone who brings something to the team that doesn't already exist. So while you are trying to meet the qualifications for the role that you are applying for, you're also trying to bring something new to the role. Next slide, please. So you may have had some guidance on this already, so I won't spend too long on it. And what I will say is that it's really a suggestion. My real advice is do you, and if you are applying to a super corporate job at a bank, keep it neat and tidy. And if you're applying to a creative role at an advertising agency, be creative and add in some flair. And I get that question a lot, what should it look like? If you know someone who happens to work in the organization to which you're applying, or you're able to find online a suggested format, then great. Otherwise, follow your gut. And I would say, if you're applying to something in finance, it's probably going to be pretty straightforward. If you're applying to something in tech, maybe the same. But if it's a fun startup or it's a media agency, maybe add a little bit of extra. In terms of ordering, this is another question that we get a lot. If you're a student or if you're a recent grad, education goes first, generally. List your university and the subject that you studied, the dates that you were there, including the months. And if you have an expected grade, then include that as well. On the experience side, include every piece of work experience you've had. Internships, part-time work, paid work, unpaid work, working in a student union. If it doesn't seem immediately relevant, my advice is include it. And I'm including things like babysitting, waitressing, all of that good stuff. It tells a story of you. And then my last point on this is check the format. And this is the small stuff, which is really big stuff. Check the format before you send out your CV. If you're changing from one format to another, like a Microsoft Word to a PDF or a Google Doc to a PDF, check that the PDF you are sending looks correct and looks in the right format that you originally made it. And I do think that usually PDF is a pretty safe bet. And I think in the next two slides, if we go down to the next one, Ben, give you a bit of an idea as to what a format could look like. So this is an example of education. Lindsay Wells went to the University of California in LA and probably had a wonderful time. And she studied history. GPA is an American grade. And then this is her study abroad program, it looks like. So all of that stuff is super relevant. And then I think the next one is some information on experience. So this is where you tell your story of what you have done. And I think this is where you can really tailor your experience to the job that you are applying for. And now, within reason, please don't make anything up or list anything that you haven't done, but read through the job description, read through the minimum qualifications, the preferred qualifications, the skills that you'll be using in the role, and think, have I done this? What can I pull out of my CV, highlight in my CV or in my experience into my CV that matches what this company is looking for in this person? Assume again that the person looking at your CV doesn't know you or your company, and make sure that you are explaining very clearly what you do in really, really simple terms. And then the next slide, thank you. This is around your skills. And a question that we get all the time is, I can see questions coming up. This is exciting. I think we'll take questions at the end because I've seen them come up. I'm sorry, and I hope that they stay. Ben, do they stay with us?
Yeah, we'll be bringing those in as you go. So once we get to the end, I'll bring them all back in.
Okay, fab. Thank you. So back to skills, and this is a question that we get a lot. I've had a lot of people around this age group and then some say, I don't have any skills, I haven't done anything. Again, it's just not true. So what I'm really trying to encourage you to do is get used to identifying the transferable skills that you have that will transfer into the role that you're doing. And if we were interactive, I would say to you, let's say you work in retail and you work in a shop, right? You work in Tesco's as a shop assistant and you're applying for a job in sales, which makes sense. What are your transferable skills? Sales is of course one of them, but there are so many others. You have spent hours at that point working with people. You have spent hours looking at numbers and making sure that things are organized. There is so much that you have done in any role that is what we call transferable. And I would definitely think about spending time on that as you're putting together your CV and as you're tailoring it for new roles. And the best way to do that is to look at the job description and find out what skills the company is looking for. All right, optional headings. So everyone may not have this, but if you do, it's great stuff to include. And again, this tells the story of you. Skills and interests and hobbies, awards that you have been part of or that you've received, whether you've done something like Duke of Edinburgh or whether you volunteered for an hour at your local dog shelter, whatever it is, it's exciting stuff to read, and you never know who is going to look at your CV. Imagine the day where you volunteered for 20 hours at Battersea Dog Homes in London, and this isn't actually true, but imagine I as the recruiter look at your CV and I too have volunteered at Battersea. It's an immediate piece of information that is relatable, and we can chat about it if we get to that point, and it gives me a really good feeling of who you are as a person, which is so important, including the work that you've done. We want to know what type of person you are as well. All right, I've given us 15 minutes for questions, and I'm glad that some have already come in. I'm going to kick us off with some that have come through in other forums or that are frequently asked to sort of ice break and get things moving. A question that we get a lot is, should my style be colorful or plain? We talked about this already. It should be whatever you want it to be. Decide the approach that you are trying to take and the vibe that you are trying to convey to the company, and then tailor your CV as such. I used to have two. I've had probably 200 versions of my CV in the past 15 years. And it's changed every time. I had one that was like blue with flowers at the top when I was working in a magazine. And then when I was in banking, it was pretty boring. It was black and white with Arial size 10 font. And now I'm at Google, so it's cool again. And don't be illusioned that once you have a job that you want to stay in forever, like I do, you don't continue to update your CV. My CV gets updated every year. And every time I do something that I think is exciting and worthwhile, I put it into my CV so that if I ever apply for another job or if anyone ever asks me for my CV, it's on there and I'm not having to spend hours on it. So once you have that shell, continue to add to it. The
Yeah,
next
that,
one, yeah, go on. Sorry.
I was going to jump in. Like, that question was ideal for me in terms of colourful or plain. I was applying for a job at a kind of innovation firm, and it felt like you had to be innovative for that. But I imagine there's a danger with that, of trying too hard sometimes. I don't know if you've ever seen someone go over the top with a CV where it kind of takes away from the actual impact.
Yeah, good question. Again, I think it depends. I think, over the top to me might not be over the top to somebody else. I think something that a lot of people put their photos on CVs. And this is Google specific. We don't require a photo on any CV, but if someone wants to put it on there, put it on there. I would say my personal preference is no photos. People can look at your LinkedIn, and I want to talk about that as well. If they want a photo, I think get the information down, get the experiences that you've had down instead of imagery. And on the LinkedIn piece, your LinkedIn should be another CV. Make sure if there is anybody on this meeting who doesn't already have a LinkedIn profile, my advised homework to you today is get one and start using it. And your LinkedIn should match your CV. And that's something that employers look at. If things don't match up, it raises questions, and you may get a background check, and that may be the reason that you don't end up getting a job if you have lied on one of the two. So make sure those two things are truthful and make sure that they match.
Really good advice. We do have I know that we do have a few year 7 and 8 classes watching, so maybe wait a little bit, you guys, until you get LinkedIn. But for those older students, get in there. Absolutely. Cool. Are there any other frequently asked questions you want to cover before we start pulling out a few of the student questions?
Yeah, the final one was around, how do I use my connections at companies to apply for roles? And my advice is use the connections and make the connections as much as you can. And if you know someone who works within a company, great. Chat to them, find out if there's a preferred format that they want the CV in. And absolutely use those as you see fit. And I would actually say, before you apply to any job, go back to LinkedIn, take a look at the company that you're applying to, and see if you know anyone who works there. And if you do, reach out.
Yeah, because for those students who aren't aware, on LinkedIn, it does start matching you up with people who've worked at similar places or gone to I know I've got a lot of suggestions of people that went to similar universities to me and that kind of thing as well. So there's always a chance to reach out. Awesome.
Good thing as well that I just want to note that you said that you update your CV yearly. I think that's a really good point, because normally people are like, okay, great, I've left school or uni, I'm going to update my CV, get a job. I don't have to worry about this again until I'm applying for my next job. And then, like you said, you go for that next job and you're like, oh yeah, what have I done in between then? So I wrote that down.
I think we're learning a lot ourselves, aren't we, Marika? Cool. So we have a few student questions, if you're ready for those. And I know we have a couple of CVs to potentially look at as well, and kind of do a bit of a live autopsy of them. So Gerald, on the YouTube comments, has asked, does the careers section of the CV, I think he's referring to, include transferable skills? Or essentially, where would you put them?
Great question, Gerald. Yes, and I would also double down and put them somewhere else. I think having a skills section somewhere on your CV, whether it's at the bottom or the top in your sort of about me, is really useful. But yeah, in your CV, under your career, you could say something like, going back to that shop assistant role, I worked at Tesco's and this was my role, and these are the transferable skills that I learned from that. So the short answer is yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Gerald, for all your contributions. I know you've asked a lot of questions throughout the week, so really appreciate that. Don't forget, people, that for the contributions, there are 6 £50 Amazon vouchers available to those top contributors. So keep the questions coming. Okay, a question we had via the form. Let me just pull that out. I've temporarily gone away from it. Was this one? How should I present myself in my CV, meaning all my qualities, or should it be what the hirer wants?
Another good question. Both. Be truthful and make sure that you're giving the full picture of the experience that you have done, but also back to that point around tailoring, look at the job to which you are applying and try and pull or bring to the surface any skills that may not already be on there that you have that they are asking for. So a bit of both.
Awesome, absolutely excellent. Okay, just having a quick check in our form to see if there's any more questions coming in. So teachers, if you want to submit anything on behalf of your students, don't forget there's the form, which I'll just throw into the bottom so you can see that and grab that out again on our ticker. Okay, so as I wait for a few more questions, should we have a look at a couple of CVs? Thank you for that one. Should a CV always be no more than an A4 page?
It depends. I think it depends on where you are in your career. Mine is still 1 page, but 2 A4 pages is acceptable. I think probably if you are still studying or if you're in your first role, stick to a page.
And on that, just before we get to the next question, on that one, would you expect to get like either 1 or 2 page A4 PDF? Do you get kind of links to a website sent as a CV sometimes, or slide decks or anything else? Sure. Is there any limit?
Great point. If you have a portfolio or you have a YouTube page or anything like that you want to include, absolutely, please, definitely include those pieces of work where appropriate. You can include them on your CV, sort of embed them, or send them additionally.
Awesome. And as you can see on the screen, what if your grades aren't great?
They might be great to someone. Who is to say your grades aren't great? It sounds like this person's being a little tough on themselves. You don't have to. There's no pressure to. I would only say that you might get asked, especially if you are applying for your first job, and that is important to the employer that you are applying to. But it's not always as important. Some jobs require no education whatsoever. So it very much depends. If it's not something that you're proud of, then consider leaving it out. It's not necessary, but do be prepared to speak to and answer truthfully if you're asked.
Maybe on a similar theme as well, if there's a period of time missing from your employment, what's the best way to deal with those inevitable bumps in people's lives?
Inevitable. Great question again. I include them. Your recruiter has limited time on your CV and limited time to look at you. If there are unanswered questions for them, it's likely they're going to move on. At Google, for example, we get hundreds, thousands of applications for a role. So anything that raises questions just requires more time from the person that's looking at the application. So if you've taken a leave of absence or if you took a year out to do something, I would strongly advise include it and give a reason for it. I work with people who've been in careers for 30, 40 years. It is inevitable that at some point in that time, they took some time out with good reason, or they were fired from their job. We're going to talk about it. So if you're able to be open about it on the CV, helpful.
Awesome.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I think that I want to leave time to have a look at the CVs, but maybe something else to come back to is also around kind of equal opportunities and those type of aspects that some of the students might be sort of interested in as they're sort of looking at how they ensure that who they're applying to is sort of fair and inclusive and all those things as well. But before we talk about that, we do have a couple of CVs. So if I bring in my screen, we've got this one here. So if I just scroll through, we've got obviously their name at the top, and then we go into a little bit of an opening and then experience. So I don't know if anything kind of jumps out, Lauren, about whether that's good practice, things that you might suggest changing.
Yeah, so this is a really good example of someone who I think, given where they are, it looks like they just recently took their GCSEs and are probably moving into their first role. I would get this down to one page. That would be my first piece of advice. And whether that, I'm not saying remove content, because the content that I have seen, and I looked at the CV before we joined the call, the content is really great. You know, all of your grades are there, your experience is there, the about you section at the top I love, and the skills at the bottom I really love. But I think it's possible to get this into one page. And that's probably just through a bit of formatting or reducing the font size, or, you know, putting a comma between the subjects instead of a new space every time. But it does look good. You know, this person has fantastic experience. I love that the dates are on there. I love that you've spoken about what it is exactly you did at each of these places. The about you section at the top is a little long. I think, you know, the my name is repetitive. You have your name at the top, so maybe that's not completely necessary. Again, your school might not be necessary because we have it right here. Education, I would bring up to the top, because I think the young professionals work is temporary. Yeah. So I would probably pull up the education to the top and list out the school that you are at and the dates and your grades.
There we go. I'm on mute. Good old 2021 sort of comment. At what point would you imagine that you start shifting the education and experience around?
I would shift it when you're in your first full-time role.
Perfect. So for those school leavers, get the education at the top, and then once you've been in a role for a while, that can switch around. Amazing. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Just while I switch to the next CV, obviously you talked about photos and things like that, and I know there's been various looking into unconscious bias in hiring and things. Are you okay to talk about some of the things that maybe Google does and that you're aware of in the industry to tackle that? Yeah, so Google it's a huge subject, right? And unconscious bias is something that we speak about every day, and negating unconscious bias starts with admitting that you are susceptible to unconscious bias. And, you know, we all need trainings around this, and we need to be given the vocabulary and understanding of where we're going wrong. What I would say about this for this group and people who are applying to jobs is read about the company that you're applying to, and learn about it. If it has a mission statement, read that. And we'll speak about this a bit tomorrow in the interview workshop if anyone's joining that. You know, I think what's most important at this stage in your career is aligning yourself to a company for which you feel motivated and kind of morally in sync. So when you get to that interview stage, be asking all of the right questions and be talking about things like unconscious bias and diversity and inclusion, and, you know, what that means to them. I think that's really important for us as a group, you know, me as a candidate and as a recruiter, to be pushing people on those subjects. And you know, it's not your job to be thinking about unconscious bias in your CV. Your CV should be the truth about you. And then it's the employer's responsibility to be doing the right thing and hiring for the best candidate, not the first candidate, and all of that good stuff. Awesome. Thank you for taking that on. As you say,
I just ask a quick question, just adding on to that. What if a student has, say, for example, a special like educational need? So if they feel like, if they're dyslexic, or for example, if they have autism, like, do they declare that? Because a young person might feel like, I want to go for this job feels right for me, but I'm scared that I might have to do a lot of writing or something like that. Yeah. I would say it's a personal preference. You know, we actually at Google, we ask the question up front to try and make people feel comfortable that they can then respond if they want to, and then we will then provide whatever is needed as extra, or change whatever we need to accommodate that person and their needs. But again, don't put anything on your CV that you don't want to speak to or that you're not proud of. And I think again, make it a source of truth, make it a story that you want to tell. And if it's something that you want an employer to know, share it up front. Great question, and thank you for answering that one as well, Lauren. Okay, in the last few moments that we've got, I'll bring up the second CV. So this one here, I'll just zoom in a bit so it's clearer. So slightly different format with this one. Any thoughts that jump out to you on that? Yeah, and I like the format. I think it's really fun.
It's on one page, which is great. I would change the ordering around a bit. I think I would put the personal statement up at the top. I would start with that. That's the about you. And then I would put, again, education, I would put before experience. And experience needs to be, needs to be expanded a bit. E.H. Dawson solicitors, 1 week administrative duties, filing, labeling, creating logbooks. I think there's probably more that this person did than those things. And I think there's probably a bit more of a story to tell there. That sounds like an impressive internship at a solicitor's. Wish I'd had that when I was young. So I definitely think speak to someone. If there's no one around, I'm happy to do it. Speak to someone about filtering this out a bit and telling your story in a bit more detail, because it looks like an impressive person who perhaps just isn't ready to tell the full story. There's probably a little bit of grammatical editing in that personal statement that I would advise, a couple of commas. Yeah, I would have somebody get a second pair of eyes on this, because the content is there and it just needs to be expanded and edited a little bit. But it's a great first draft, and I love the format. It's unusual but attractive.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's really useful to kind of get a sort of actual CV in front of you and get that experience look at it as well. Hopefully that's loads of tips for the young people to take away. If you haven't started, then you can start your CV right now. I think, as Lauren, as you said, I worry that there's a lot more that a lot of the young people could put on a CV that they're not aware of. So have a think about all of the little hobbies and jobs and things. Sounds, I think back yourself a little bit as well. And one thing to finish on, I was reading a book by Caroline Criado Perez about the data gap that exists between males and females and how that can impact. And there was a bit there about sometimes males over-egging themselves and females maybe underestimating their abilities. Is that something that you have encountered or that you see? And any advice to the young females out there?
Plenty of advice for the young and the males. And anyone who feels like they're, different, or they come from a different skill set or background. Absolutely. There is a statistic, and I don't remember what it is, Ben, but it's something like women tend to apply for roles where they meet 100% of the skills required, and men will apply for a role where they meet like 10%. Don't quote me on those numbers. I think that they're wrong. But the story is, yes, historically, women have tended to not apply for roles they don't feel fully qualified for, and men have applied for roles that perhaps they should feel underqualified for. You have to really read, it's up to the employer to put minimum and preferred qualifications and be precise. If there's something like a language requirement that you don't meet, I'd probably say spend your time somewhere else. But if you feel like you're almost there, go for it. And if it's your dream job and you meet none of the requirements, just go for it. And you have to get tough on this stuff. I've been rejected from probably hundreds of roles. And I'm now in my dream job. So don't be afraid. And we'll talk about this in the interview skills set tomorrow as well. You just have to get a tough skin. And I appreciate that the year 7s in the school probably don't have that yet, but it will come. And please don't build a LinkedIn profile if you're in your 7th.
It's a very varied audience that we've got. Thank you so much. We've gone a little bit over, but I think it was key to sort of explore some of those extra points. Thank you so much for your time, Lauren. Really appreciated. As you mentioned, we've got the interview workshop tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. If anyone wants to grab the link, that's available in the comments. So you can bookmark that now, ready for tomorrow morning session. So we'll let you get off and obviously sort of get on with the rest of your day, and we'll look forward to connecting with you again tomorrow. Thank you so much, Lauren. Really useful session. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Right, Marika and we're off to write a CV, right?
I actually am. Yeah, I'm like, right, things to do.
Cool. And we encourage you to do the same. And who knows, some of the teachers watching, thank you for managing that. Maybe you need to have a look at your own as well. Awesome and tremendous. Okay, so we're going to sign off for today. We'll see you tomorrow morning. You've got that interview workshop and lots of great sessions as well. So check out the emails from the Just a Guide Foundation on what's going on tomorrow. And we'll see you then. Ta-ra.
Bye.
Have a great